We reliving in an era where war is no longer fought with boots on the ground and missiles are fired not just from planes and warships, but also from submarines. In this 21st century, war is all about technology. And one of the most important factors to winning a war is by controlling the narrative. You see, back in the days of our great-great-grandparents, wars were simpler. You either won or lost. If you won, you took the other guy's land. If you lost, you gave away your land, or maybe got colonized by the victors. But today, if you want to study modern warfare, it's best to start with the Russian invasion of Crimea in 2014, because that was when the world saw the rise of hybrid warfare. It was the first time in modern history that an army invaded and occupied another country without declaring war. So what exactly is hybrid warfare? Well, it's a combination of conventional warfare, irregular warfare, and cyber warfare. And it blurs the line between peacetime and wartime. This makes it extremely difficult for the victim of such warfare to respond appropriately. In the case of Crimea, Russia sent in its little green men, which are basically Russian soldiers without insignia. They seized key government buildings and strategic locations. Then they held a referendum where the people voted to join Russia, which the Kremlin happily accepted. It was a masterful display of military skill and subterfuge, but it was also a stroke of genius when it comes to controlling the narrative. You see, while the world was watching, Russia managed to portray itself as the victim in this story. It blamed Ukraine for provoking the unrest in Crimea and claimed that its actions were a necessary response. And despite overwhelming evidence that the whole thing was orchestrated by the Kremlin, Russia managed to convince many that it wasn't at fault. And this brings us to the present day and the war in Ukraine. You might think that it's a war between two countries, Ukraine and Russia. But the truth is, it's a war between Ukraine and the Kremlin. The goal of the war is not just to take Kiev, but to destroy the Ukrainian state and prevent it from ever joining. NATO and the Kremlin has been working towards this goal long before the war started. In 2014, after taking Crimea, it started supporting separatists in Donbass. Then it used propaganda and disinformation to turn public opinion in Russia against Ukraine. It also annexed Crimea to the Russian Federation and appointed a loyal puppet regime under the control of the Russian security services. And all of this happened without a formal declaration of war. The only thing that changed is that in February 2022, Putin decided to shed the last vestiges of his subterfuge, and he just came out and said, "We're at war." But the war had already started years ago. And while Putin may have finally admitted it, it doesn't change the fact that there's no right way to fight hybrid warfare. For starters, you can't win a war by fighting alone. You need allies. But the problem is, according to international law, you can only go to war if you're officially at war. No country wants to side with an aggressor, so Putin had to find a way to fight a war without actually starting one. And how better to do that than by using proxy forces like the little green men in Crimea. These soldiers don't represent any country, so there's no violation of sovereignty. At least that's what he told himself. And this brings us to another reason why hybrid warfare is so insidious. It's almost impossible to defend against. Let's say Ukraine wanted to stop the separatist movement in Donbass. If it used force, Russia could have accused it of aggression and started a diplomatic crisis. And if Ukraine didn't use force, then the separatists would have kept gaining ground. It was a lose-lose situation. And unfortunately, this is a trend we're going to see more of in the future. Why? Because wars are getting more and more asymmetrical. One side always has access to more resources, technology, and manpower. So the smaller side has to resort to unconventional tactics just to stand a chance. If you look at it from Russia's perspective, it makes perfect sense to support separatists in eastern Ukraine. It doesn't cost much, and it achieves the same result as occupying those territories, except it's much easier to deny. But even though hybrid warfare is becoming more common, it's not invincible. To win a war that's fought in the shadows, you need to be willing to fight in the shadows too, and sometimes that means doing things that aren't exactly moral. In the case of Ukraine, that meant accepting dirty bombs, attacks on civilians, and the destruction of civilian infrastructure, because the only way to win a war against Russia is by making the war about more than just Russia. And to do that, you need to make it personal.